US President Joe Biden has broken his silence about the Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan. Addressing the American people on Monday afternoon, Joe Biden struck a defiant tone and said he stood squarely behind his decision to withdraw US troops from the country. The US president rejected broad criticism of the chaotic withdrawal that has engulfed his administration in crisis. He blamed the Taliban takeover on Afghan political leaders who fled the country at a time of crisis.
I stand squarely behind my decision.
Facing fierce blowback for the chaos that ensued after the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan, President Joe Biden Monday defended his administration's handling of the evacuation, saying that while the Taliban's rise was quicker than expected, Afghanistan's political leaders fled the country and left behind an Afghan army unwilling to fight the militant Islamists.
This did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated. So what's happened? Afghanistan political leaders gave up and fled the country. The Afghan military collapsed, sometime without trying to fight. If anything, the developments of the past week reinforced that ending U.S. military involvement in Afghanistan now was the right decision.
He has also blamed his predecessor, former President Donald Trump, for empowering the Taliban and leaving them, quote, in the strongest position militarily since 2001. The decision to withdraw sparked criticism from allies and adversaries after the Afghan government collapsed within days and the U.S. scrambled to evacuate American civilians and embassy employees from Kabul. The Taliban's advance led to harrowing scenes of thousands of civilians desperate to flee the country, prompting the U.S. on Monday to temporarily suspend evacuations. A social media video showed Afghans desperately clinging to the outside of a U.S. military aircraft on the tarmac at the airport in Kabul, and later, this video that showed objects falling from a plane.
But if Afghanistan is unable to mount any real resistance to the Taliban now, there is no chance that 1 year, 1 more year, 5 more years, or 20 more years of U.S. military boots on the ground would have made any difference.
The political risks facing Biden for this decision, however, remain to be seen. Many Americans have expressed support for Trump and Biden's decision to leave Afghanistan, America's longest war. Biden also said his decision is a result of the commitment he made to American troops that he wasn't going to ask them to continue to risk their lives for a war that should have ended long ago. Biden coupled his defense with a warning to Taliban leaders, let the U.S. withdrawal proceed unimpeded.
If they attack our personnel or disrupt our operation, the U.S. presence will be swift and the response will be swift and forceful. We will defend our people with devastating force if necessary.
And just a fast update on the response to Joe Biden's speech. Within the last few minutes, former President Donald Trump has put out a statement calling the withdrawal from Afghanistan a disaster that makes our withdrawal from Vietnam look like child's play. And he says that President Biden has brought great shame in many ways to our country. Let's go across live now to WION's correspondent Susan Tehrani, who is joining us live from New York. Susan, that's how President Biden's predecessor is responding to his speech. But the president and his team, I suspect, will be much more concerned by the way in which it was received by the American people. Is there any indication yet as to what kind of public reaction there is to this considerably botched withdrawal operation by the US?
That's right, Simon. Well, we have two public opinion polls coming out this morning. One from the Trafalgar Group, which you may remember was the only poll that predicted Donald Trump's victory back in 2016. The survey conducted by this group says that only 23% of Americans right now approve of President Biden's performance and withdrawal plan from Afghanistan. This poll was conducted between August 14th and 15th. But another poll also says that 49% of Americans at this point approve of the United States withdrawing from Afghanistan altogether, compared to 69% of Americans polled by the same group back in April. And perhaps one of those reasons is because we're getting more information that the Biden administration wasn't completely honest when it said that American troops are losing their lives on a daily basis inside Afghanistan. We're now learning that there hasn't been a single American life lost in 18 months, and the troops that were in Afghanistan were basically there to provide intelligence support for the Afghan army that was fighting themselves.
And Susan, do you have a sense of how this is all playing out in terms of domestic politics? I mean, clearly Republicans on Capitol Hill piling in on Joe Biden. He's also being widely panned on the international stage. How cautious are Democrats feeling about where all of this heads?
It's absolutely important for domestic politics right now. I mean, considering the fact that you have the 2022 midterm elections coming up, and when we saw how that ended up for President Obama when he withdrew U.S. troops from Iraq, and how the Democrats got wiped from the House of Representatives and the Senate. But that's one point of it. Another point is both Democrats and Republicans on both sides of the aisle are concerned about America's leadership role in the world, and how America will be perceived among allies and adversaries alike, and not just how Al-Qaeda and groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS will be looking at the United States and how it abandons its allies, but also countries like Russia and China looking to see how the United States and notably this administration really handles an exit after so many years. And I think the question for a lot of those lawmakers and the American people ultimately is not why the United States left Afghanistan, but the catastrophic manner that it did. And I think just a quote from the New York Times to wrap things up, it's President Biden will go down in history fairly or unfairly as the president who presided over a humiliating final act in the American experiment in Afghanistan. End of quote.
Yeah, without question. Susan Tehrani, WION's correspondent in New York, live there for us this morning here in on the east coast of the United States. Thank you very much for that. It's worth pointing out that the Pentagon said today that there are between 5,000 and 10,000 Americans still awaiting evacuation from Afghanistan. So this very complicated security situation and evacuation operation at Kabul's international airport is by no means over yet. Very nervous hours and days ahead for the Biden administration. Moving on now, the political leadership of Afghanistan abandoned the country as the Taliban took over, leaving millions of Afghan citizens essentially to fend for themselves. In Kabul, while thousands rushed to the airport in an attempt to flee, civilians in other parts of Afghanistan are finding ways to seek shelter in neighbouring countries. But are Afghanistan's neighbours prepared to handle an influx of refugees?
The fate of millions of Afghans hangs by a thread. They are desperate to escape the rule of Taliban in their country. This heart-wrenching image is from inside Reach 871. A United States C-17 military cargo plane packed with 640 Afghans trying to escape the Taliban. The Air Force evacuation flight from Kabul to Qatar came near the record for most people flown in the Boeing airlifter. According to a U.S. defense official, the U.S. military cargo plane was not intending to take on such a large load. But in panic, several Afghans, including women and children who had been cleared to evacuate, pulled themselves on the C-17's half-open ramp. On Monday, videos from the Hamid Karzai International Airport showed thousands of Afghans on the tarmac rushing towards a US C-17 in an attempt to flee the country. While some were seen clinging to the passenger air bridge, others, in utter desperation, held on to the plane's tires. According to reports, at least 2 people died after they fell from the aircraft soon after its takeoff. Satellite images showed the chaos at Kabul's airport. Tens of thousands of civilians outside Kabul have also abandoned their homes. They are making every effort to escape the Taliban rule. They are now trying to find shelter in neighboring nations. The UN Refugee Agency estimates that 400,000 Afghans have already fled their homes this year. In Central Asian nations, the governments anticipate a large influx of refugees. Uzbekistan, Afghanistan's neighbor, is already witnessing an inflow of Afghans. Uzbekistan forced the landing of 46 Afghan military aircraft carrying 585 troops. All of them had illegally crossed its border. 158 civilians and military personnel have crossed over the Amu Darya River into Uzbekistan over the last 2 days. They're all facing criminal investigation. Tajikistan, that shares a 1,350-kilometer border with Afghanistan, allowed several military planes carrying Afghan soldiers to enter the country's airspace. Sensing a migrant crisis, this 5-kilometer-long and 3-meter-high wall is being built by Turkey along its border with Iran to prevent a refugee influx. Ankara is planning to build a wall along its entire 295-kilometer-long border with Iran. The walls will be complemented with other deterrents such as barbed wires and trenches.
Turkey is facing a growing migration wave of Afghans transitioning through Iran. We will continue to make efforts to bring stability to the region, starting with Afghanistan.
Pakistan had already closed its border with Afghanistan. The Imran Khan government has said that it has already reached its limit and cannot accept more Afghan refugees. Vehicles loaded with goods crossed a Pakistan-Afghanistan border point at Torkham as the 2 neighbors continue bilateral trade. Concerns in Europe have also grown over the increase in Afghan refugees seeking shelter. The Lithuanian government has said that Afghan refugees have begun arriving in the country via Belarus. It is suggested that a new migrant route could be in its infancy. With the Taliban taking over, fear and dread has gripped every province of Afghanistan. Leaving their homes behind, desperate Afghans are trying every route possible to escape the feared rule of Taliban in their homeland. But with this mass exodus, fear of a possible refugee crisis looms large. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
And just a little bit more of breaking news regarding Afghanistan. Within the last few minutes, NATO's Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has echoed the White House in terms of blaming the Afghan political leadership for the growing crisis there. He says the plan was to build an Afghan state, but not to stay there forever. The frustration, he says, is easy to understand when we see that so many years of efforts have not given better and stronger results when it comes to Afghan state structures. That's Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO. Taliban rule is little short of a nightmare for the Afghan diaspora around the world. Many haven't been able to contact their families due to the chaos and bedlam unfolding in the country, leading to a sense of panic and confusion.
Even if my mother dies, I will not cry that much as I cried yesterday. But we have no option left. When you look to their faces, like when the Taliban, the name comes to your mind, you feel of terror, you think of killing, you think of beating, like it's a bad dream.
Since yesterday, I have not been in contact with my family, but a few days ago, they were in another province. They were really worried. They had to leave the place because of enormous fear and war. They've left their homes. It's a very unclear situation.
Members
There are about 80 to 90 members of the Sikh community in Kabul and they're hoping to get evacuated. But the Taliban is saying that they will not harm them and are asking them to continue managing the Gurudwara. But the children are very afraid and saying they don't want to stay there because the Taliban have guns.
All the Afghan people are crying. All of us are sad. All of us need to support. My country now is wounded. About the young generation, they have so many dreams, they have so many goals, but what will happen now in Afghanistan? For young generation, for children, for women's rights.
There is a sense of hopelessness. There is a sense of trepidation, sadness, and also seeing that Taliban flag go up has emerged in many the feeling of homelessness and not belonging anywhere.
So, senior leaders of Afghanistan fled as the Taliban closed in on Kabul. The list of those who made a hasty departure includes Afghan President Ashraf Ghani. So, where is Ashraf Ghani now? What we know for sure is that he left Afghanistan with his national security advisor, Hamdullah Mohib, and another associate. While no Afghan official has confirmed Ghani's current whereabouts, reports suggest that he may be in Oman after Tajikistan denied his aircraft permission to land. Ghani may seek to head to the United States, as Washington had firmly backed him for so many years. But now that he has left Afghanistan, does Washington still recognize Ghani as the country's president? The US State Department declined to comment about that when they were asked.
There has not been a formal transfer of power. There has not been a formal transfer of power.
Who does the United States recognize as the leader of Afghanistan then?
So this is something that we are working, again, with the international community. You saw in this statement from the UN a clear consensus emerge that a political settlement will be in everyone's interests, that a political settlement will be best positioned to achieve what it is manifestly in our collective interests. And by our, I mean the United States. I mean that of our allies and partners, but also importantly, probably most importantly, the interests of the people of Afghanistan. A political settlement is what we are still pushing for.
Meanwhile, the Russian embassy in Kabul has made a dramatic claim saying the Afghan leader fled the country with sackloads of cash. Nikita Ischenko, a spokesman for the Russian embassy in Kabul, told reporters 4 cars were full of money. They tried to stuff another part of the money into a helicopter, but not all of it fit, and some of the money was left lying on the tarmac. So what about Afghanistan's Vice President, Amrullah Saleh? He was last known to be in the Panjshir Valley on the day that the Taliban entered Kabul. On August the 15th, pictures on social media showed him having discussions with Ahmad Massoud, son of the late Afghan commander Ahmad Shah Massoud. The Panjshir Valley remains out of Taliban hands for now. Amrullah Saleh had fought under Ahmad Shah Massoud. He has pledged to continue the fight against the Taliban. In a tweet, he said, and I quote, "I will never, ever, and under no circumstances bow to the Talib terrorists. I will never betray the soul and legacy of my hero, Ahmad Shah Massoud, the commander, the legend, and the guide. I won't disappoint millions who listen to me. I will never be under one ceiling with the Taliban. Never," unquote. However, Ahmad Massoud has been quoted as saying that for the sake of Afghanistan's security, he is open to talks with the Taliban. Ismail Khan, veteran warlord known as the Lion of Herat, was captured by the Taliban. He had been resisting the terror group in his Herat stronghold, but Herat, of course, fell to the Taliban on August the 13th. Khan's capture provided one of the most potent symbols of the crumbling of resistance against the Taliban. But according to Tolo News, Ismail Khan is now in Iran. We do not know if he was simply released by the Taliban or whether the veteran warlord reached a deal with the insurgents. The whereabouts of other prominent Afghan leaders remain unclear. Abdul Rashid Dostum was the first Afghan vice president and a pro-government warlord. The ethnic Uzbek leader was forced to flee as the northern city of Mazar-e-Sharif fell to the Taliban. It remains unclear whether Dostum reached Uzbekistan or fled to Turkey, where he had earlier received medical treatment. Visuals on social media showed Taliban fighters inside Dostum's palatial residence over the weekend. It remains unclear whether Foreign Minister Hanif Atmar is still in Afghanistan or if he managed to escape. And just one more bit of breaking news. White House officials here say the airport in Kabul is now open. Flights are resuming. They say the US moved more than 700 people, including 150 Americans, out of the country, but with 10,000, possibly as many as 10,000 Americans still awaiting evacuation. There is a very long haul ahead. On another dramatic day, that's all we have for you on WION Live Broadcast from Washington. I'm Simon Marks. Stay with WION for all the latest developments on the situation in Afghanistan. I'll see you again tomorrow.